Back on In the Booth here on Talk Central Phoenix. I am Jim Bunner, America's greatest journalist. Okay, so what we've talked about tonight, we've talked about healthcare workers in Arizona leaving the job because of the vaccine mandate and what that's going to do to affect our local economy. We have talked about these people at ASU possibly facing charges for harassing Kirsten Sinema while she was in the bathroom. Okay, now obviously the vaccine mandate, that is something that is just dividing the country. Some people want it, some people don't want it. The masks are dividing the country. The shutdown last year, how we should be dealing with COVID, these are all things dividing the country. And you know, Kirsten Sinema, about the most centrist person in the U.S. Senate right now, okay, she's still the personification of centrism in politics today. All right, we're divided up on just about everything. I think everybody knows that. And we've been divided up for roughly 20 years or so. Now, the perfect guy to talk about some of this is a guy who I would think would know an awful lot about the red state, blue state divide. I mean, considering that he ran for vice president of the United States way back during the famous Bush v. Gore incident with the Electoral College, something else that is dividing up the country. Former Senator Joe Lieberman is joining me today on In the Booth. We've got him on the phone, and he is discussing a book that he's got out. It was published October 19th, and I'll bet it's doing very well right now. It's called The Centrist Solution, which I think is a solution a lot of Americans are looking for a lot of reasons right now. Senator Lieberman, thanks a lot for coming on In the Booth.
Hey, Jim, it's great to be on, and particularly since I now know that you're America's greatest journalist. I'm honored to be on.
Well, my gosh, we're ready to just rock and roll. Okay, so
Okay.
Talk to me about the centrist solution. What is your book about?
Okay, so like most Americans, when I watch and listen to what's happening in our federal government in Washington, I get disappointed, I get frustrated, and I often get angry. And I have had the privilege of serving 24 years in the Senate, and I always try to work across party lines. I'm a Democrat. I worked with Republicans because that's the way you get something done in this country, and it's been true since the founding of the country at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. So I thought maybe there's something I could do to get us out of the hole Washington is in, and that is to write about the importance of people of differing opinions coming to the center, talking to each other civilly, seeing if they can find common ground, and compromising, not to get 100% of what everybody wants. It's pretty hard to do in any situation, whether it's a marriage or a business or government, but getting something done other than standing on different sides of a fence and throwing rocks at each other. And that's what the centrist solution is about. And I just want to add, being a centrist is not the same as being a moderate. You can be a liberal or conservative or Republican or Democrat or independent or moderate. That's different. Those are philosophies or ideologies. Centrism is a strategy, and it does exactly what I said a moment ago. It brings people to the center to talk together, work together, and get something done for our country and their constituents.
All right. Well, Senator Lieberman, what are some of the things that you think Washington needs to do to get everybody to come to the center? I mean, we've got this situation with our U.S. Senator Kirsten Sinema, who, you know, God bless her, she's trying to make everybody happy, and I think she's doing a good job of it, but she seems to be infuriating her own base and her own party because they just keep coming after her. You know, we got this situation where these far left wingers, these lucha people, they came into the bathroom, they accosted her because she wasn't going along towing the Democrat Party's line, and a lot of Democrats have gotten on her case about this. You know, but there are a lot of Americans who don't want this $3.5 trillion spending bill.
Yeah.
You know, is this a good example of what you're talking about, and how would you work to solve some of these divisional issues?
Well, the story of Kirsten Sinema is the story of the problem I'm talking about. That is really getting worse and worse, and can only be solved with what I call the centrist solution. And frankly, it begins with two kind of very human reactions. One is to treat people with respect and civilly. Don't follow them into a bathroom and yell at them. How do you expect somebody to want to do what you're asking them to do if you do that? The second is if somebody disagrees with you, as Senator Sinema appears to me is doing quite sincerely, then don't treat them as if they're a traitor to your party, because going all the way back to our first president, George Washington, he warned the country that what he worried about in our future was that loyalty to party would be greater than loyalty to country, and that would divide the country and weaken it. At that time, he thought it could even compromise our newfound independence from Great Britain. Today, we're so strong it won't compromise our independence, but division, as we're having now, the inability to get anything done, the constant fighting, the failure to realize that we're all Americans and in this together, there's no question that's weakened our country at home and throughout the world. And I give Kirsten Sinema a lot of credit for having the guts to do what she thinks is right, whether she's pleasing members of her own Democratic Party or not. I've been there, so I can feel her pain. But I can tell you, looking back, that I don't regret anything I did, because I did it because I thought it was right. And there's not much better feeling than that if you're in public life. You don't get elected just to get reelected. You get elected to get something done for your country and your constituents.
All right. Well, Senator Lieberman, on the left leaning or the Democrat side of things, we've seen some of this that you need to be elected and reelected to get something done. But on the other side of this, on the conservative side, on my side of things, we've got this issue, and we've had this even here in Arizona. People are getting in trouble for putting up flags that say "flunk Joe Biden." Only they don't say flunk Joe Biden, they say something else, and now they're even chanting this at the football games. I wonder, is some of this in D.C., where it's gotten so heated and there's so much rhetoric, is this now starting to spill out into the general population and making the general population less civil?
Yeah, it is. I mean, this just didn't happen overnight. Back in the 90s, I worked with a great conservative Republican, Bill Bunner, who was in the Reagan administration. And I worked with other people in both parties because we were worried about the impact of violence, particularly, and sex, and language in our entertainment culture that our kids were watching. I mean, when you get to be an adult, you have to assume that people are going to figure out how to handle it. But that kind of loss of standards and values in our language seeped into the general culture, and it began to be adopted by people in elective office, and even on television, sometimes on radio, but particularly on television, on cable news. I see broadcasters sometimes saying words that if I said when I was a kid in our house, my father would send me to my room, and if it was real bad, he'd probably slap me. And he was right. So we got to get back to that, because we're defining our culture, our great American culture, down, and that's not the way we want to be. And again, I repeat what I said before: if you treat somebody you're working with, whether you're a senator or working in a factory or in an office, nasty and just demean them personally, they're not going to want to work with you. And that's a lot of what's happening in Washington today. They got to raise it up again.
All right. Well, there's another thing that politically is dividing the country, and I'm sure you've heard about this. You would be the perfect guy to talk to about this. It's the Electoral College. And in the last 20 years, this is how we've determined our presidents for the last 200 and whatever years that this country has been around. But in the last 20 years, there's now been a movement to abolish the Electoral College and determine the presidency completely 100% by popular vote. And, that division is getting worse and worse because of the election of George W. Bush and the election of Donald Trump. Now, I would think you would be a perfect person to ask about this because you were one of the guys who won that popular vote in 2000,
Right.
but you didn't win the Electoral College. I'm just curious, do you have an opinion on the Electoral College, or what types of things need to be done, about
Yeah.
people's opinions about the Electoral College?
Yeah, I do. And of course, the opinion I've had for a long time was intensified after 2000, when Al Gore and I got 545,000 votes, more than George Bush and Dick Cheney, but couldn't take office because we didn't get the electoral votes in Florida. And to me, that doesn't make any sense anymore. If you go back and look at the debates in the Constitutional Convention, the Electoral College was created because the founders, as much as they believed in freedom and democracy, also were worried that the average voter might do something that they thought was dangerous for the country. So they set up this system where when you go to vote for the president, vice president, you're actually not voting for the president or vice president, you're voting for the elector from your state. And then it's that elector who can go to Washington when the votes are counted, electoral votes, and vote for whoever they want. Now, a lot of states in the century since the Constitutional Convention have passed laws that oblige their electors to vote for the candidate who got the most votes in their state, but some don't. I think it's still an undemocratic system, and I'll never forget when I traveled overseas, often with Arizona's own great John McCain, or when he and I met with foreign leaders when they came here after 2000, they would say, I don't understand. How could Al Gore and you have gotten more than 500,000 more votes than the other party, and you still didn't get to be president and vice president? The reality is I haven't found another country in the world that has anything like the Electoral College. We ought to have the popular vote elect our president and vice president. Now, I understand after last election, there's going to be a lot of questions that still could be raised about the counting of the popular votes, but at least it's the people of the country and not a handful of electors who are politically selected who will decide based on the vote who's going to be leading our country. Now, I'd like to see the Electoral College repealed, but I doubt it's going to happen.
Well, yeah, I doubt that it's going to happen too. You would need 2/3 of the states to vote against
Right.
it, and over half of the states benefit from it. So what my counter argument would be to that is that the Electoral College was created so that politicians running on a national stage, a national platform, would be appealing to larger swaths of the American population than just the population centers. And it
Right.
seems to me that if the Democrat Party has gotten beat twice by the Electoral College in the last 20 years, that the Democrat Party has a problem with appealing to voters in smaller states such as Wisconsin or Iowa or
Yeah.
Ohio. And, you talk about the country coming together and the country, giving a little to each side. Well, okay, maybe this is part of why our politicians should be doing more to work together and try to find more of a middle ground with other Americans so that we don't, keep getting beat by the Electoral College.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's all about unity, and it's all about enabling our government to regain the trust of the American people. When you're in a great country like ours, and the people are as fed up with their national government as most people are today, and as pessimistic about the future of our country, which is not the characteristic mood of the American people, usually more optimistic, we're in trouble. And I think there are a lot of causes for it, but part of the solution is for people in Washington to work for the country and forget about your party and your ideology and whoever gave you a lot of money in the last election. Maybe you're not going to get renominated or reelected, but you will have served, as John McCain used to say, a cause larger than yourself, which is the betterment of the United States of America.
All right, well, Senator Joe Lieberman, or former Senator Joe Lieberman, joining me today on In the Booth. You know what? It's really been absolutely fantastic to have you on today. Is there any special place that people can find your book?
Well, like everything else, it's online. It's certainly on Amazon and Kindle and other places like that, and hopefully in your bookstores. But hey, Jim, it was a really good discussion, and I appreciate it. And it's through discussions like this that hopefully people will get the idea that there's a lot more that we have in common than that divides us, and we ought to start finding that common ground and building America back from that common ground. We urgently need it today. That's why I wrote the book, and I hope it helps.
You know, I agree with that entirely, and I've certainly enjoyed talking to you. I hope that the people who listen to this podcast will start to appreciate the other side of a political issue after listening to you and I have this conversation. This has been one of the best interviews that I have had in my very long 20-plus year career. All right, well, Senator Lieberman, thanks a lot for coming on again, and best of luck with your book.
Thanks, Jim. Best of luck to you, and I look forward to talking to you the next time. Take care.
All right, you bet. We'll have more in the booth coming up, folks.